Hey there, watercolor fans. Rusty Nelson here, and I'm working on a landscape tutorial. Yes, it's the long anticipated or long discussed watercolor landscape that has kicked my butt in about 3 different attempts in trying to get this tutorial done. So I thought I would shake it up and try to do this real time, no edits, and see how it goes. Maybe it puts me on the spot and makes me not overthink what I'm doing here. So to start with, in previous videos I've shot, I've done a quick little analyzation of the image that I'm working from. It's an image that I shot myself. It's a sunrise. It's shot in the plains of Kansas, so there's nothing other than sky and the foreground in this piece. So it's really is this a beginner level? It is a beginner level, it's an intermediate level, and then it's advanced level. So at any state or stage of development you are at the moment, this would be a good tutorial for you to work on and to try and to see how it goes for you. It's definitely going to be testing. It tested mine. It'll test your chops, your expressiveness, your ability to trust your decisions. And again, it is all about having that hand and knowledge base and confidence in what you're doing for this to pull off right. And that's really what's been lacking in the previous attempts that I've made, is that I just didn't like the end result. I got to the end result 3 different times, and nope, not going to show you that. So we'll see how this goes, and hopefully I'll be able to pull this off with a little pressure of doing this real time and with no or little to no edits. Maybe editing out some of my verbal faux pas. So we'll see. And I'll try not to use too many of my crutch words as I'm putting this together, so I don't have to edit them out. That's the one thing about doing a real-time commenting as I'm doing it type video, is it just drives me nuts because I keep using the same crutch words over and over again. So there's one of them. We are going to get started on this, and let's start dissecting this thing right from the start. So this is almost like a live stream format. Here we are. We have the image of the skyline. It's a cloudy sky. It's a gorgeous sky. We got a transition, a steel gray, purpley, almost there's a purple tint to it in this sky, and it has a diagonal color wash going across the skyline. Going through there's some purples here. It goes into reds here, yellows, oranges, and then we have this gorgeous phthalo blue looking set of clouds in here. Wispy clouds, which tells me that that's going to have to be done with some wet on wet technique, right? But there's also some sharper edges as well, which means your paper is going to have to be a little drier to catch that sharp edge as well. So the clouds kind of kicked my butt. And then what really kicked my butt was this foreground area right here. It's definitely divided into like the rules of third. The horizon's really on the lower third line of the rules of third. So this is going to be a sky dominant, and that's the thing I got to keep in mind, where I don't think I was keeping that in mind very well with my previous attempts. I think I was getting too wrapped up and focused on the foreground, because we have this tree line in the right along the horizon line. We got the tree line. We also have a 1-point perspective road in this thing. We have the telephone poles going off into 1-point perspective. But really, I think the money shot for this tutorial is going to be the sky, the sunrise, and the clouds. And I'm going to de-emphasize the foreground. It's just going to be a mass, a shape. Hopefully, it will read properly as a hilly horizon with some trees on it. So there's going to be a lot less detail and effort on my part to try to define what the hell's in the foreground. That's my goal. So I have a plan. Now we're going to get started and try to do this. Hopefully this won't take too long. I'm not working in a very large format, so it's more of a study. maybe something I can then move on to a larger piece. And I think as another problem, I was jumping. I haven't done any landscapes, any full-blown landscapes like this for a while, so I'm a bit rusty. Yeah, hello. So we'll just see how this goes. I've had 4 attempts, or at least 3 attempts. This is attempt 4, so maybe I've got enough of the gremlins out of my process here that I'll be able to pull this off with this tutorial. So let me get ready, and we will start attacking this little watercolor. That sounds so violent. So all right, we'll see you in a minute. All right, so we're going to get started first by just mixing up a couple puddles of color here. So I'm going to start out with some ultramarine. I think it'll interact well. And this is going to be a thin mixture as well. So I'm going to work a little bit of this ruby red into it to get just a hint of the purpley color in it. And I'm going to knock it down just with a little bit of burnt umber. No, that's burnt sienna. And just get this kind of a steel reddish color going here. And I made a mess on the opposite side. Let's get that over here. All right, so I want that side to be my purple color. Very thin. Let me clean out my brush. All right. I'm going to count these. That was one of my crutch words. All right. All righty then. And so, let's see. All right, now, there's 2. I'm going to mix up a orange mixture. Probably about the same consistency, although I might want this to be a little more aggressive. I'm going to start out with a wet on dry, which kind of transitions into a wet on wet process and technique. I've done various times. I have more success with skies if I do it that way rather than the lay it down with some wet color or wet water, just water on the paper first and then coming in with the pigment. I just seem to have more of a consistent train wreck when I do that. So I like to start out, and I'm working with a flat brush, and this is a very nice sable-ish. I'm sure, I doubt it's definitely not a real sable, but it's an artificial synthetic sable. It holds a lot of water, so I'll be able to really load this baby up. And I'm going to come in, lay down, wet on dry, and transition into the wet on wet. And here's my pigment. I'll lay that down first and then transition over to some water. Just have a secondary brush here ready to go with just water. And let's see how it goes. I'm not going to draw anything. I'm freaking going to do this a cappella. All right, here we go. All right, so nice reddish purpley color here. I'm going to get a little more red. Let's get this other red. There we go. I'm going to transition right up here with a little more red. And I'm working kind of in a diagonal. All right. Let me get a little bit of that water, just water. I'm going to thin it out just right here. I'm going to introduce some of that orange and yellow. Let me get a little more yellow in it. There we go. And we'll just throw that in there. It's very wet, so, and I don't care about the horizon. I'll block that in. We'll fake that in a minute. Come back, clean out my brush. Get a little more of that purpley color right up in here. And a little more of the red right there. Okay. And this is wet. This is really, really wet right now. So, alrighty, there's 3 times for alrighty. Did I say okay a couple times? I want to go ahead and get a little more saturated orange right here. The one thing I like about this process where I'm talking as I do it is that it really takes away a lot of the work that I have been doing with my tutorials with editing. So as long as I'm not totally, and I think I see with some of the ones that I've done in the past, people whoops, sorry, people like when I make my verbal faux pas. What, starting out with a lemonade stage. This is stage 1, by the way, stage 1, and we're talking really wet on wet, letting those colors meld and and mix together. So I got a good orange transition from that purpley through the reds. It's a little lighter there. I see a very soft, subtle bloom where I'd introduced just the water with a bit of that red. Got some orange and transition yellow to orangish color. And I don't care about the fact that I went into the foreground. Again, I'm going to make that a really dark shape, right? Just, it's a horizon. It's going to be low key. And that's what I did with the photograph here, is essentially I worked with, when I printed the photograph out, I oversaturated it. I wanted to see those colors in the sky, but it also oversaturated the foreground. I'm just going to ignore all of that information that's in the foreground area. It's just going to be that big block of shape, and I'm yakking here just to let this dry just a little bit, because I'm going to have to come in here in a few seconds. As soon as I lose the sheen a little bit more, I'm going to come in and start working with the blues. And I'm going to clean off my palette right now just to get a cleaner spot here. Just make it neater. All right, there we go. All right, I still have my little brush here, but I'm also, hang on, hang on, I got to find I'm looking for my fan brush. All right, let's look here. Well, my fan brush has disappeared. I'm going to have to edit this out. Oh well, I'll fake it. I'll fake it till I make it. All right. So it is still pretty, it's still too wet to attempt my clouds, but I can at least kind of get in here. I'm going to get a little bit of this phthalo blue. Get a fairly good, ooh, there we go. That's some serious color. All right, so cool. All right, so we got this cloud bank coming in at a diagonal across the skyline, and then we have a bank of clouds off in the distance as well. So, all right, I'm going to unload this brush just a little bit, and I'm going to just try to come in, and we're just going to kind of come in. We got some sharp edges. All right, I'm going to get a little more water. I'm going to start softening it up a little bit. I'm going to come back up this way. It's still damp. It's still going to be spreading, especially right down in here in that area. And then I'm going to pull this on down. I'm going to try to keep it as irregular as I can. And I'll come back in also. It's really nice and soft right there. Coming across, we'll throw that in there, some scrunchy edges, and I'll grab that horizon line, that cloud in the horizon line. All right, cool. And then I'm going to try just a little dab. I'm going to get a round. This is a big fat round, right? So I'm just going to come in and maybe try to soften a little bit of the information right in here. Just soften some of those edges. Make it a little cloudier. Pull some out. There we go. All right. The best thing you can do is try not to try too hard. And that is hard in itself. All right, cool. I'm using the photograph only as a jumping off point. I'm going to get a little blue in my brush. I'm going to get a little more of the wispies up in here. There we go. Get some of those nice wispies. Throw a little more color in the center of it. This is still very damp in here, so I can drop in more pigment, and it's going to feather out nicely. I got a spot over here I want to introduce a little more of that pigment. Okay. There's some right there. We'll throw that out there. All right, so, all right, I'm trying to resist the urge to keep fussing with it. I gotta just trust it. See how it dries, how it comes together, and we get some interesting color interactions. We get that nice color transition when it crosses over the pink into the orange. The blue really interacts with it. We're creating some sort of a early morning greenish color to that cloud. I want to throw a little more right down in here. A little more definition. There we go. All right. And I'm trying to be interpretive of the photograph. I'm trying not to be literal with it. I don't want to produce a reproduction of the photograph. I'm just trying to capture the essence of that cloud. It's very damp. We just keep layering a little more glazing where it's wet. Let that color spread out. It dries lighter than it goes down. I'm going to need a little more of the blue right up in here. A little more of that wispy. There we go. That's a nice wisp. Let's get some wisps down here. This is a dry brush. All right, so cool. All right. That is going to have to dry now. And I don't want to do any more with it right at the moment. I may work a little, once it's dry, I might do just a little more dry brush for the crisper, sharper edged clouds, and then do a little softening of the edges when I put that in there. But right now, I've done enough. It just needs to dry. All right. So we'll let it dry, which will probably take about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. And I'll jump right back in where we left off. And I'm going to start blocking in that foreground. And hopefully, it won't be a frickin' train wreck. And I won't have to rip it up on screen, right? Oh no. Do you want me to do that? If it sucks, you want me to rip it up? Just to show you, you can do it. It doesn't matter. You can rip it up and feel good about it just for the fact that you tried. If it didn't work, so what? All right, so I'll quit yakking, let this dry, and we'll be right back. Okay, it has dried. It's been about 5 minutes, and I can still feel a little moisture in there, so it's not going to be absolutely a sharp edge as I paint in on this. So I have my rounds I'm going to work with, and this little fine liner. That's a fun one to work with, especially if you're trying to get some natural shapes and things, irregular shapes. So I am working with a number 4 right here, I think it is. Let's look here. Yep, number 4. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to drop in this horizon line. And I've got this nice mixture of phthalo blue here. I'm going to drop a little bit of the burnt sienna, burnt umber into it. I'm going to create this nice dark greenish dark color. And it needs to be fairly thick. Sorry, sitting. Let me get over here. All right. Mixing. All right. Nice thick consistency. Probably about a coffee. All right. So I'm going to swing over here. That horizon line is going to come right along the base, right at the base of those clouds. And we'll see what we can do here. I'm going to totally fake it. I don't care what the photograph looks like. This is going to be all freeform right across that lower third of the painting. All right, so I've got that established. And as that's working, I'm going to keep in mind, that'll be the largest contrast. I'm going to get a little bluer bit of it, and we'll just pull that down. I'm going to get a bigger brush so it'll get a little more pigment going on the surface, and let the watercolor do its thing, changing, adding a little different color each time I come back in here, maybe even drop a little green in it. We'll just do that, and we'll create an interesting shape that will represent the foreground of this cloudscape, sunrise, So there's been some really nice things happening with the various washes that I'm really liking. So I'm getting some nice color variation on the surface of the foreground. I'm going to pull it down just a little bit further. And I do like these little peekaboos. And I got some really nice crunchy peekaboos right up over in this area on the piece. And it's really, I'm real tempted not to do any more to it. I'm going to try just a little more blue, a little denser blue, just on the interior shapes of the clouds. And they're drying pretty nicely. We could probably attack that here in a minute. So, but we got some nice things happening here on the foreground now, and I'm going to just leave that alone and quit fussing with it. That's another thing I was doing too much of on my first piece. With all the tutorials I've been doing, you see a lot of fussy ass detail work, especially with those bricks and stones and wood grains, the old rustic doors and stuff like that. That takes a lot of time at the back end. This is different. This is more about working your wet on wet techniques. You cover a lot of real estate very quickly, and it's something you got to get in the right mindset for. And we're just going to let it set for a few more minutes again. So back again, waiting for the paper to dry just a little bit so I can. This amazingly, this is almost done. So I'm going to do a little more stuff in the clouds. I may intensify some of the oranges a little bit with a glaze, and I'm going to drop in some really dark darks, just defining some of those tree lines and things in the distance on this. I think I'm going to ignore the freaking 1-point perspective in it and just deal with the natural organic shapes. So keeping my fingers crossed, we'll see how this goes. Okay, boys and girls, everything has dried. Well, it's still damp. I can feel a little moisture in it, but it's dry enough that I want to try to do some of the dry brush work. All right, so I still have this nice little puddle of phthalo blue down there, and it's now got just a little bit of burnt sienna or burnt umber kind of mixed into it. So I got a kind of a steely bluish color here, and sorry, I just knocked the table. All right, so I'm going to try a little sharp edge dry brush, and I'm going to get a wet brush, just damp, so I can maybe soften edges if I need to. I got my little puddle up here in my palette. I'm going to unload it. I don't want a lot of pigment in it, and I'm just going to kind of scrape across and get a little more of a sharper edge foreground kind of layering to the cloud right in here. Get a little more. Damn it. Hit the table again. Sorry. Here we go. So right up here I want some. So we'll come across. Just get some of that wispiness. Gives that cloud a little more depth. Okay. And I got to be careful not to overdo it. And it's easy to do. I'm going to pull it down here, and that's about it that I want to do. I might pull just a bit out this way, a little sharper edge out that way. All right, so I got a little more dense depth on my clouds, and I need to do this foreground right on the horizon cloud too. So I'm going to come in, got a big old swash there, thinned it out a little bit. There we go. So I got some soft, I got some sharp. We'll just pull that on over. There we go. Okay. I'm going to throw just a little bit more right up here. There we go. All right, I'm not fussing with that cloud stuff anymore, other than to maybe soften that right there. Just a little bit. There we go. All right, just going to accept it. It is what it is, right? So I'm not going to try to control it any more than that. if I do any more, it's going to start looking overworked. And with these cloudscapes and landscapes, that's the one thing you can't get away with that I was doing quite a bit with all my other tutorials of various subjects and objects and things like that, was all that fussy detail is kind of what pulls it together. With these landscapes, it's just the opposite. So my foreground is nice and dry. Yeah, pretty dry. And I'm going to mix up a very dense, I think this is my, there we go. I'm going to mix up a very, very dark color. I'm going to use a very, very small brush. And I'm going to put a little more contrast right along the horizon. Right there. All right, here we go. And I'm going to make it a broken edge. Vary the thickness, the density. Maybe get a little irregular quality to it. Maybe there's some trees off in the far distance. And that's definitely a standard scene for central Kansas. A vista, a horizon line, put a little divot right there. Here we go. I don't have quite the consistency. I need it to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to mix a little more into it. I'm going to get some ultramarine. That'll make it a darker one. All right, there we go. Throw a little bit of that wet right there. So, nope, still not thick enough. All right, let's get aggressive here. There's a nice puddle, thick puddle of ultramarine, or I'm sorry, burnt sienna. There we go. Now we're talking. That is the right consistency. This is more of a cream state. And it's going to do what I want it to do. Give me some dense, thick, opaque-ish colored line. All right, so horizon, trees in distance. On that horizon, there we go. And it sucks right there. There we go. All right, so I'm going to let that dry just a little bit, and I'm going to just drop in a tree line. And it's going to be just below. I need a bigger brush. I need just the right kind of brush. Let's look here. I think this is going to be the one. All right, so we got that nice look. Actually, before I do the tree line, I'm going to do one other thing. Get a let's see here. All right. I'm going to drop in just a bit of a glaze. I'm going to intensify that orange on the sunrise. Okay. So a thin coffee-ish leading towards tea loaded brush, and I'm going to come right along this horizon line right down in through here. I want to drop in some of this orange right in through here. It's thin. It's going to dissipate pretty easily. And I'm just going to glaze it in. And I'll come over here. I'm going to unload my brush. I'm just going to feather that just slightly. Come down here. Feather that out. There we go. Cool. All right, so that was I see a couple of hard edges I want to fix. I'm going to just soften that up right there. I'm working with a Strathmore 400 on, was this the 4? No, this is the 300. Strathmore 300 paper. The previous ones I've tried the Strathmore. I broke out my Arch paper and tried one with that, and it wasn't the paper's fault. It was definitely all of my technique sucked with what I did with the other three pieces. So this one's coming together good. I'm trusting. I'm feeling the love with what I'm doing here. I see some edges here I need to soften. I'm just going to come in, just soften that out just a little bit right there. All right, so we have a little more intense orange with the horizon line, and I could even come right down here. This little gap right there, let me get another brush. All right. Oh, that still had goop in it. Let's get this orange right here. There we go. I'm going to get a brush full of some orange. I'm just going to drop a little more of that intense orange right there where the sun is really affecting the horizon. All right, so we got a good horizon line. I'm going to drop in some trees as soon as all that stuff dries. So I'm going back to letting it dry. It'll be about another 5 minutes before we're ready to go, and we'll do it one more time, and we're going to declare this piece done. All right, here we are. We have the piece. It's fairly dry. I still feel just a dab of moisture, but it's not affecting the surface. I'm going to try and add in some tree lines into the horizon and maybe some leading lines. And that's it. I'm not going to do a whole lot with this this overall piece. If the road was in here, I'd figure it'd be about right in here. But again, I'm not going to fuss with the road or anything. I'm just going to see if I can pull this off with some additional trees and get in tree mode. Think. Take deep breath. Here we go. Trees right along, right above the horizon line, and dropping below. All right, so try to keep shapes irregular. And I might switch to a slightly smaller brush. This is a fairly dense and thick mixture of paint. Throw a little bit of a shadow line underneath it. There we go. I'm going to draw a little dry brush, just a little textural aspect. There we go. Throw a little more over here. We got another tree. We'll throw a couple of trees right on that edge. Again, maybe throw a little more of that leading line texture coming down. All right, and we're getting real close. I'm going to throw a little more on that edge right over there. One more switch up. I'm going to throw in this little brush and see if we can get an interesting mark there. All right, so, and that's pretty much all I'm going to do with that foreground. All right, now if I think, and it's a little too sharp, I'm going to get a smaller brush. I'm just going to soften just right on the edge, just a little bit. Hopefully without destroying my tree-ish shape. But I just want to soften it out just a bit. And that's just with water. I may have screwed that one up. I'll deal with that one later. All right, there we go. Again, practice these organic shapes. Maybe even mix just a little bit of the orange into that too. Like the trees are catching some of that golden ray. All right, and that is pretty much the extent of this watercolor. Just throwing a little bit of that orange right back there where it's coming up. And really, this is kind of an abstract process. You just gotta think and work with those organic shapes and let the viewer's eye do a lot of the work. So anyway, I'm going to declare this done. I'm going to declare this one a success. This is actually the best one of all the 4 that I have attempted so far. And again, this is at the size. You can frame this up, make it look good, or it's just a study. Could lead you to a larger overall piece where you're taking everything you did here in practice and apply it to a bigger overall piece, which I may do in the future. And if I was feeling real frisky, you could even drop in a little, maybe a bird circling around. But it's early in the morning. They're not circling around at this time of day. So anyway, that's my landscape, getting back into the zone after all of my other tutorials, my objects, my oranges, my bananas, all that stuff where I was fussing around with everything on the back end. This one's all about not doing that and letting the watercolor do its thing. So I hope this was informative. This will be probably the most frustrating thing that you're going to be working with, but do them anyway. They're good for you. I used to hate used to hate landscapes. To a certain degree, there's still that there, but I do appreciate what watercolor can do with a landscape. Once you're tuned in, once you're dialed in and really in the landscape mode, that abstract mode, that letting the watercolor do its thing, letting go of the control and trusting that the media will do its thing. So, hey, I hope you liked this tutorial. If you did, if you learned anything, give me a like, hit the subscribe button for me. I do really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next tutorial.